A bountiful apple harvest is leading the theme of today's show. Join us for an apple tasting party, cider, and a colossal apple pie, all coming up next. I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to today's show. Well, it's the harvest season, and as you can see, it's apple harvesting time. And today's show, you guessed it, it's all about apples. From seeing how one California ranch makes homegrown cider and apple pies to meeting a fabric expert named Spooky Apple. Now, Spooky's going to show us how this new and very colorful fabric can stand up to the elements both inside and outside our homes. And a little later, I'm going to put this fabric to the wine test. This is going to be a fun show, particularly if you're like me and you love these sweet and sometimes tart apples. You're going to want to stay tuned to see how I use these for an apple tasting party. Right now, we'll head off to the break, and when we return, we'll go to the Giz Ditch Ranch in California. From time to time, my travels are led by my nose, or my appetite as the case may be, such as a little jaunt I took to the Giz Ditch Ranch in Watsonville, California. This third-generation family farm specializes in apples and the many products that come from these autumnal trees. We'll see how to make this colossal apple pie a little later, but first let's talk to Vince Gizdich about the cider made on the farm. Well, Vince, how many pounds of apples does it take to make a gallon of juice?
Right now, Alan, when the apples are as juicy as they are, we'll get about 8 gallons of juice per 20 pounds of apples.
Really? And what about the blend? Do you just use one variety, or is it a mixture?
Yeah, no, we don't. It's very important to us to use a blend. We use different apples to try to obtain the same flavor throughout the season.
So what is the ratio?
The ratio is an old family secret, and I would be in trouble if I was to.
Well, we certainly don't want to get you in trouble. What are some of the varieties that go into the blend?
Alan, our main apple is the Newtown Pippin. And we do use a lot of Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, and McIntosh.
Vince, tell me a little bit about the whole process of making apple juice.
There's various facets of it. The first one will be the harvesting of the apples. And the thing is to get the fruit off at the optimum time. And from that point, we like to put them in the cold storage as quickly as we can. It's a fine line, Alan. We don't want to pick them too mature. If we pick them too mature, they won't keep in the cold storage. A certain amount of apples will go into the hopper, depending on what apples we do have and what we're trying to achieve at that particular time of season. And from that point, the apples will go up our conveyor into a hammer mill. And the hammer mill is a very important part of the operation because it will pulverize the apple into the consistency of what looks like applesauce. The pulp is placed into a sack, and the four corners of this open cloth are folded inward towards the center, making a pillow effect. From that point, it is pulled underneath a 1-ton press. And from that point, the juice is extracted. The press goes down.
So 1 ton of pressure goes on to the 7 pillows, and out comes the juice.
Yes, yes. From that point, it's caught in a catch tray. From then, it's siphoned down into a larger pan. From then, it's pumped into our filling tanks.
And the results are delicious. I've had it. It's superb apple juice.
Thank you very much.
It really is. Now, a little later in the show, I'll give you some ideas on hosting an apple tasting party. And next, some colorful fabrics from my friend Spooky Apple. If you've got Sunbrella fabrics, do try this at home. Details next. Now, I want to show you something. I know you think I'm crazy. I'm going to take this red wine and I'm going to spill it on this fabric. Watch this. See? Nothing happens. The fabric's fine, and that's because of a new revolutionary process that's making headlines in the world of outdoor furnishings. I've been testing out some of the Sunbrella fabrics in my garden and in the gardens of some of my design clients. So I asked Spooky Apple with the company to step into the studio and tell us a little bit more about this colorful yet stain and weather resistant fabric.
Sunbrella is actually made from fibers that are color saturated. That means the color is poured into a vat and it becomes an integral part of that fiber. So when the fiber is created, it's color throughout. Think of a carrot and a radish. If you take a cross section of a carrot, it's orange all the way through, and that's Sunbrella. Where a radish is white on the inside. That fabric was dyed, or the fiber was dyed, or the yarn was dyed, but it always had a white core. So eventually, it'll go back to that white core, where Sunbrella, even as its color goes away, it's the same color throughout, so it never fades. We have a vast array of fabrics, many colors. Our plant, we have the capability to both create the solid colors that are given to us in fiber, or we can blend and create our own colors. We do warping, which creates all these beautiful stripes. And then, of course, we have a multitude of solids that you can choose from. For years, Sunbrella was a marine fabric. Then we were awning. Then we did casual furniture, but now we're doing interior furniture. This is just the soft, it's supple, it'll drape. It makes you a beautiful curtain. It makes a bed skirt. You can use it on cushions outside. A lot of people are creating that outdoor room in this cocooning stage of America, and they use the fabric to do drapes around their porch to create privacy, to block wind, and of course they last. And also, because the color palette is so vast, you can let your outdoor room flow into the inside or vice versa. So many rooms in the past, when you look at an outside area, the porch was an area and your family room or kitchen or whatever was an area, but they didn't go together. So a lot of people kept blinds and they closed it off and they completely separated one area of their home from the other. Now with Sunbrella, with all the beautiful sunrooms and all, you just throw the doors open and the color goes right through, because you can use these same colors inside your house now with some of our residential furniture fabrics.
Up next, tips on hosting an apple tasting party. It's a lot of fun. And a little later, a mile-high apple pie. We're giving the fruit of the season a workout today. Before the break, let's take a look at one more plant for bringing a bit of color into your life. It's called the summer snapdragon. It's actually called Angelonia, and it's very heat and drought tolerant, but will also thrive with a certain amount of wet feet, if you know what I mean. Now, there are many new plants on the market that are trailing or mounded in nature, but height is still necessary for good garden design. Angel Face Blue can serve as a beautiful vertical accent. More colorful plants can be found at plandsmith.com. I was so inspired by the range of heirloom apples that I recently hosted an apple tasting party where I tried 12 different old-fashioned varieties. Each apple was sliced and passed around while I shared some of the history about the fruit. The guests used scorecards to judge which apple was their favorite. They could express why. It was a bit like tasting different varieties of wine. Now, to cleanse the palate between the various apples, we nibbled on fresh baked bread and butter, cheese, walnuts, grapes, and all kinds of goodies. It was really a lot of fun. Each of these varieties of apples have their own individual signature flavor. It's so good. I don't know about you, but growing up, my grandparents, I remember them storing canned goods as well as potatoes and things like that in the root cellars. And when the apple harvest came along, they took certain apples and wrapped them in newspaper like this and stored them in the cool, dark cellar, and they would last for up to 3 months. Now, the reason for wrapping them is that if there were any bruised spots or places on the apples, that they wouldn't touch one another, which will cut down on any chance that any spoiled spots might get into the other apples. Now here's a fruit with quite a history. It was grown in the very first garden. You see, it was the apple that got Eve into so much trouble. The Romans first carried it to Britain, and it was the English who introduced it to America in the 17th century. And now the apple, well, I guess it's as American as apple pie. We've all heard of Johnny Appleseed. Well, he was no myth. He actually lived, and his name was John Chapman. And he indeed planted appleseed wherever he went. And I suppose he's responsible for getting us a leg up on the over 7,000 varieties we grow in this country. But if you think that's a lot, there are over 10,000 varieties grown worldwide. This number would include all of the beautiful spring flowering crab apples that we grow strictly as ornamentals, as well as this little guy, which is an unnamed seedling. This just means that it came up from seed, and it never had a hybrid apple variety grafted onto it. So that's why the apples are small, but they still taste great. There's so many varieties of apples out there with subtle differences in flavor, and it's sad that modern marketing has led us to depend on only well-known varieties such as Red and Golden Delicious, Granny Smith, and McIntosh. You know, there's always something going on in the garden. You're either harvesting or you're planting, and sometimes in the same season you're doing both. Now we're harvesting apples, but now's the time to plant things like iris. I have a letter here from Adeline in Virginia, and she writes, "Alan, should I plant my iris with the root completely underground, or should I let them surface just a little? I just received some tall-bearded iris from one of my friends, and I'm not really sure how to plant them." Well, Adeline, you know, if you're planting tall-bearded iris, you always want to make sure that about the upper half of it is exposed. That's called a rhizome. These rhizomes should be planted with the roots facing down and the tops just skimming out of the surface, as I just mentioned. And while you should plant them about every foot apart, note that the iris are clumping, so every 3 or 4 years you'll need to thin them out. Now you'll want to site them where they get at least half a day's sun, and it's very important that they get well-drained soil. Good luck with them. All right, we're heading back right after the break for more on apples. We'll find out how those folks at Giz Ditch Ranch build these mile-high apple pies. You know, I have to say that I think food is most enjoyed when it's eaten in season. And the apple is certainly a signature, a delightful signature of autumn. When I visited the Giz Ditch Ranch in Watsonville, California, I had to sample their signature dish, the Mile High Apple Pie. Take a look. Kathy, it's easy to see why you call these Mile High Apple Pies. I want you to show me how you make these.
Okay. First we need our bowl of apples.
Start with the apples. Now, how many apples do you use in one of these monster pies?
Well, each pie has 3 pounds of apples.
3 pounds.
And that equals about 10 or 12 cups of sliced apples.
Gosh. Now this is a pippin, I understand.
These are pippin. Granny Smith is good also.
Right.
And Golden Delicious.
That's the one I tend to use because I can't always find pippins.
That's true.
All right, so you add the spices and so forth to the apples, of course, first. And what ingredients do you use for one pie?
1 cup of sugar. You can adjust the sugar to how sweet the apples are.
Right,
okay?
sure. Gives you an opportunity to make more pies.
That's true.
And sample them, more importantly.
A couple of teaspoons of cinnamon, about a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, a couple of teaspoons of flour. That'll help thicken it.
Yeah.
Just a little dash of ginger. Mix it all so that all the apples are evenly coated.
Excellent. Now they're all coated.
They're all
Boy, don't they
coated.
look great?
Tastes good at this point too.
Yeah.
And
All
we'll
right.
take the bowl.
Okay. Now this bowl serves as
This is the form
the
for
form
the
for the
apple
pie.
to make it. And let's press it down a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll put this pie crust on the top.
Right. So the bowl is the form. Right. Now people could just use at home a bowl that's similar to that. Right. I see. So you kind of have to work with them once you get them.
Stack them up.
Wow.
Turn
It's
them right
quite
side up.
an engineering feat, really, isn't it? Boy, look at that. Do you ever have? Thank you. Do you ever have problems with an avalanche of apples where
yeah.
they just slide off onto the cabinet?
All the time.
Well, it's just one of the occupational hazards of building a mile-high apple pie. I see. Oop, there we go. Some slid off, no problem. Just prop it up.
Pick them up and put it
Yeah,
back on.
I see. Kind of keep the form.
See if my pie's bigger than yours, so let's.
Yeah, what
put some
happened?
apples.
Thanks for sharing.
Okay, how's that?
Maintain
Don't make it too
equity
pointy,
in the
it'll fit.
bakery.
There you go.
That's good. All right. Now, do you just is this just a standard crust that you use?
pretty much.
Yeah.
Just shortening and butter and water and salt. Okay, well now we're going to paint the crust.
Right. I like these brushes.
Yeah, they come in handy.
So you paint the crust right along the edge.
This is beaten whole egg.
So you just paint this around the edge. This seals the pie to keep the juices from flowing out of the oven, right?
Yes, it does.
But this thing makes a lot of juice, with 3 pounds of apples. So now it's time to veil this masterpiece.
Yeah, this one's yours.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to watch and see how you put yours on.
Just put it
Okay, halfway. Just drape it halfway, right? And then gently fold the other half over.
Be real careful not to stretch your dough or your pie will sink.
So you want to keep the same thickness all the way around, right?
If you can seal it without stretching your dough, then it's more apt to say pie after it's baked.
So like this? How am I doing?
That's great. Some people like to make a fancy crust. We just cut it off.
Right, just make it simple.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. I like that.
Keep it simple. Okay, now we're ready.
Keep it simple. Okay.
We're going to paint the whole
Now
top
we're going
of
to paint the
crust.
top.
This will give it a nice golden shiny look.
So that's how you make it look so
Pretty.
even and golden.
Now just a teeny tiny hole like that.
Just a teeny little hole in the top. You take it. All right.
So the steam will stay in and bake the apples.
So you'll cook these for how long?
About an hour and 10 minutes at 350 degrees.
Now that's with a convection oven.
Yes, it is.
Very good. Well, as you can see, there's no stain here. It's really amazing. This is good stuff. Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We learned a lot about apples, and I want you to make sure you give that mile-high apple pie a try. Go to my website, pallensmith.com, for the recipe. Until next time, from the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.